Please subscribe to my channel. This is my sincere request to you, honey. I assumed Christmas dinner would be just another night of enduring my family's condescension until my brother's boss slammed a pen onto the table. He looked directly at me and demanded my signature right then. The room went silent because that document was not a holiday card, but a deed capable of ending my brother's career. My brother had just mocked me as a failure, completely unaware that the logistics company he was desperate to acquire actually belonged to me. My name is Harper Rodriguez. I am 39 years old, and if you looked at the seating chart for Christmas dinner at the Silver Peak Lodge, you would assume I was an afterthought. The name card placed at the far end of the table, right next to the drafty service entrance, was written in a slightly different calligraphy than the others, as if the host had only remembered my existence 5 minutes before the doors opened. The lodge itself was situated high in the mountains of Highlands, North Carolina, a place where the air was thin and the money was old. Outside, a light snow was dusting the fir trees, looking picturesque and serene. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. The private dining room was bathed in what the brochure probably called warm amber light, designed to mimic the glow of a hearth. To me, it felt like being under an interrogation lamp that had been dimmed just enough to be polite. I took a sip of water. The wine had been flowing for 2 hours. A vintage Cabernet that my brother Derek had ordered with a loud performative snap of his fingers. I did not drink around my family. I needed my edges sharp. Derek Marlowe sat at the head of the table. He was 34, 5 years my junior. But he occupied space as if he were the patriarch of a dynasty that had spanned centuries. He was wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than my first car, the fabric shimmering slightly under the chandelier. He was currently in the middle of a monologue about his recent promotion at Greystone Freight Solutions, a logistics giant that moved everything from microchips to medical supplies across the eastern seaboard. "It is going to be a record-breaking quarter," Derek announced, his voice booming enough to rattle the crystal stemware. "The board is eating out of my hand. We are streamlining the distribution channels by 15%. 15%. Do you have any idea what that does to the bottom line?" My mother, Linder, leaned forward, her eyes glassy with adoration and too much wine. "You were always a visionary, Derek. Even as a boy, you just see things other people do not." She cast a quick darting glance at me when she said other people, a reflex she had honed over 3 decades. My father, Stuart, nodded in agreement, cutting into his prime rib with aggressive enthusiasm. "That is the Marlowe blood. We are builders. We are leaders. Not everyone has the stamina for the corporate world, some. It is a sharp tank." I kept my gaze fixed on the centerpiece, a sprawling arrangement of holly and white roses. I was wearing a simple charcoal sweater and black trousers, clothes that were clean, well-tailored, and entirely forgettable. That was the point. In my professional life, I ran a boutique consultancy firm in Raleigh that specialized in risk control and corporate restructuring. I was the person companies called when they were bleeding cash and did not know why. I found the leaks. I fired the dead weight. I saved businesses from bankruptcy. But to the people at this table, I was Harper, the one who did paperwork, the one who lived in a small apartment, the one who did not have a corner office or a company car. "And who is this gentleman?" my father asked, gesturing toward the man sitting to Derek's right. The man had been silent for most of the meal. He was older, perhaps 57 or 58, with silver hair cut with military precision and eyes that were the color of slate. He wore a suit that was significantly more expensive than Derek's, but he wore it with none of the flash. He looked like a man who understood that true power did not need to raise its voice. "This," Derek said, beaming as he placed a hand on the man's shoulder, "is the reason we are all eating at a 5-star lodge tonight. This is Wesley Carradine, the CEO of Greystone." My parents practically vibrated with excitement. The CEO here at their family Christmas dinner. It was the ultimate validation. "Mr. Carradine," my mother gushed. "What an honor. Derek speaks so highly of you." Wesley Carradine offered a polite, tight smile. He did not look at my mother. He was looking at the untouched wine glass in front of me. "Derek is a spirited executive," Wesley said. His voice was a low baritone, rough like gravel. "He insisted I join you. My family is on the West Coast this year, and Derek promised me a dinner I would not forget. He promised you a show, I thought. And now it was time for the main event. Derek stood up, his face flushed with alcohol and arrogance. He clapped his hands together. Speaking of family, Derek said, turning his body so he was facing me. The motion was theatrical, a magician revealing his assistant. I want to introduce everyone properly. Wesley, you have met Mom and Dad. But this, he gestured a limp hand in my direction, is Harper. I looked up. I did not smile. I did not frown. I just waited. Harper is the how do I put this kindly? Derek chuckled. A wet, ugly sound. She is the quiet one, the cautionary tale. My father laughed. It was a harsh bark of a sound. Don't be too mean. Son Harper tries. She does. My mother added, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. She has her little job, checking boxes, filing forms. It is very administrative. Not everyone can handle the pressure of the big leagues like you, Derek. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the old scar tissue of 1,000 similar dinners, rubbing against my ribs. I had played this role since I was 10 years old. The foil, the shadow, that made Derek's light seem brighter. If I argued, I was hysterical. If I left, I was jealous. If I stayed silent, I was defeated. So I stayed silent. Derek, emboldened by the audience, took a step toward me. He looked at his boss, seeking approval. She is the failure of the family. Really? Derek said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was meant to be heard by everyone in the room. 39 and still pushing papers for peanuts. No ambition, no drive. I saw Wesley Carradine shift in his chair. He was not smiling. He was not nodding. He was watching Derek with an expression I recognized from my own work. It was the look of an auditor watching a manager try to explain a missing ledger. Then Wesley turned his head. His eyes locked onto mine. It was an intense probing stare. He was not looking at my clothes or my lack of jewelry. He was looking at my posture. He was looking at the way my hands were folded calmly on the table, not fidgeting, not clenching. He looked as if he were trying to place a face he had seen in a blurred photograph a long time ago. Derek did not notice the shift in the room's temperature. He was too busy enjoying his own cruelty. Come on, Harper, Derek said, waving his wine glass, sloshing a little red liquid onto the pristine white tablecloth. Say something to the CEO. Tell him about your exciting life of what is it you do again? Data entry. I specialize in risk mitigation, I said softly. My mother sighed loudly. Boring. See, I told you. Derek laughed again. Exactly. She is great at the small stuff. If you need a permit filed or a typo fixed, Harper is your girl. But real business strategy vision, he tapped his temple. That is beyond her pay grade. Wesley Carradine cleared his throat. The sound was not loud, but it cut through Derek's laughter like a guillotine blade. Is that so? Wesley asked. Derek froze, sensing he might have misstepped, but he doubled down, assuming his boss was just playing along. Absolutely, Derek said. She is harmless. She is only good for signing meaningless papers that nobody else wants to read. The silence that followed was heavy. The music in the restaurant seemed to fade away. The clatter of silverware from other tables became distant white noise. Wesley Carradine reached down to the leather briefcase he had placed by his feet. The sound of the zipper opening was sharp and distinct. He pulled out a single thick manila envelope. He did not look at Derek. He did not look at my parents. He placed the envelope on the table and slid it across the white linen. It stopped exactly 3 in from my water glass. Then sign this, Wesley said. My parents looked confused. Derek looked like someone had just spoken to him in a language he did not understand. Excuse me, Derek asked, his smile faltering. Wesley ignored him. He kept his eyes on me. Your brother says you're good at signing papers. Harper, I have a transaction that has been stalled for 4 days. My legal team tells me we are blocked at the final acquisition stage. I need a signature to close the deal. I looked at the envelope. I did not reach for it yet. Wesley continued, his voice steady. I need the owner of the asset to sign off on the transfer of the logistics hub in Savannah. Derek let out a nervous laugh. Wesley, you are confused. Harper does not own anything. She rents an apartment in Raleigh. She drives a Honda. Wesley did not blink. Open it, he said to me. I reached out. My hand was steady. I opened the flap of the envelope and slid out the top document. It was a standard commercial property transfer agreement. It was thick, heavy, and printed on bond paper. I skipped the legal boilerplate and looked at the names of the entities involved. Buyer Greystone Freight Solutions, seller Marlowe Bay Holdings, LLC. I felt a cold, electric thrill run down my spine. 6 years ago, I had restructured a failing shipping company in Charleston. They had no cash to pay my fee, so they offered me a dilapidated abandoned warehouse near the port and a stretch of access road that connected the main highway to the freight terminal. It was a useless piece of concrete until it wasn't. I had held on to it, quietly paying the property taxes, burying the ownership under an LLC named after a childhood vacation spot I was the only one who remembered, Marlowe Bay. Over the last 6 months, Greystone Freight Solutions, my brother's company, had been aggressively buying up every inch of logistics space on the coast. They were trying to create a monopoly on the supply chain, but there was one gap in their map, one choke point. They needed my warehouse. They needed my road. Without it, their trucks would have to detour 40 mi, adding 2 hours to every shipment. It would destroy their margins. Derrick had been bragging about this acquisition for weeks. He had told me he was going to close the Savannah deal by Christmas and secure his bonus. He had no idea he was trying to buy me out, but Wesley Carradine knew. I looked up from the paper. Wesley was watching me, waiting to see what I would do. He had not come to this dinner to celebrate with Derrick. He had come to ambush the ghost owner of the property that was holding his company hostage. He expected me to be flustered. He expected me to be the failure my brother described, someone who would panic and sign just to please the powerful men in the room. I read the final clause. The purchase price was blank. I looked at Derrick. He was staring at the document, squinting, trying to read the text upside down. "What is that?" Derrick asked, his voice high and thin. "Why does it say Marlowe Bay?" I looked at my mother. Her mouth was slightly open. I looked at my father. He had stopped chewing. Finally, I looked at Wesley. I picked up the heavy fountain pen that Wesley had placed next to the envelope. The metal was cold against my fingers. Derrick let out a breath of relief. "See, she will sign anything. Just tell her where to put her name. Wesley." I held the pen over the signature line. The tip hovered a millimeter above the paper. Then, slowly, deliberately, I capped the pen. The click echoed in the silence. I pushed the document back toward Wesley. "No," I said. The word hung in the air. Derrick's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. "Harper, what are you doing?" "Do not be an idiot, Mr. Carradine asked you to do something." I stood up. I smoothed the front of my sweater. I picked up my purse from the back of the chair. "I do not sign legal documents on a dinner table," I said, my voice calm, leveled, and devoid of the trembling submission they were used to. "And I certainly do not sign them without purchase price filled in." Wesley's eyes widened slightly. A flicker of something passed across his face. "Respect." Derrick stood up, knocking his chair back. "Harper, sit down. You are embarrassing me. You do not own that company. That is a mistake." I looked at my brother. I looked at the man who had spent the last 2 hours and the last 30 years telling me I was nothing. "It is not a mistake, Derrick," I said. I turned to Wesley. "You want Marlowe Bay Holdings. You want the access road." Wesley nodded slowly. "I do." "Then you can make an appointment," I said. "My office opens at 9 in the morning. Bring a better offer." I turned my back on the table. "Harper," my mother shrieked. "You get back here." I walked toward the heavy oak doors of the private dining room. Behind me, the sound of the restaurant had died completely. Every head was turned. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the ragged breathing of my brother, whose career was currently dissolving in a glass of expensive Cabernet. I did not look back. I pushed the doors open and stepped out into the cold, clean air of the hallway. For the first time in my life, the cold didn't bother me at all. The silence inside my car was a physical relief, heavy and absolute. I did not turn on the radio. I did not want music or news or the sound of another human voice. I just wanted the hum of the engine and the rhythmic thump of tires on the asphalt as the Silver Peak Lodge faded into the darkness behind me. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the road slick and black, reflecting the headlights like a mirror. I gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2, my knuckles white, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline that was finally beginning to curdle into exhaustion. For 30 years, I had perfected the art of being invisible. It was a survival mechanism I developed before I even knew the word for it. In the Marlowe household, attention was a finite resource hoarded entirely by Derek. To compete for it was to lose. To argue was to be labeled emotional. To succeed was to be viewed as a threat. So I had chosen a path of least resistance. I became the wallpaper. I became the quiet one. I became the failure they needed me to be so they could feel superior. It is strange how comfortable a lie can become if you wear it long enough. My mother called my work administrative. My father called it keeping busy. They imagined I spent my days filing alphabetical tags and making coffee for people who did the real work. The reality was something they would not understand. Even if I explained it to them with a slide deck, I am a cleaner not of messes on the floor, but of messes on the balance sheets. My firm Rodriguez Consulting does not advertise. We do not have a shiny website with stock photos of people shaking hands. My clients find me when they are desperate. I am the person a board of directors calls when they realize their CEO has burned through 34 of capital with nothing to show for it. I am the person who walks into a manufacturing plant, looks at the supply chain, and points out exactly where 20% of the budget is leaking out the back door. I restructure debt. I negotiate with angry creditors. I fire the people who are draining the life out of a company, and I set up the systems that keep the lights on. It is not glamorous work. There are no galas. There are no ribbons to cut. It is grim mathematical surgery. It requires a stomach for conflict and an eye for the microscopic details that everyone else misses. And that was the irony that had been eating at me for the last 6 months. The very skills my family mocked were the only reason Derek still had a job. I merged onto the highway, the city lights of Raleigh glowing faintly in the distance. My mind drifted back to the dozens of emails sitting in my archive, all from Derek. They always started the same way. Harper, quick favor, Harper. Just take a look at this real quick. Harper, the math isn't adding up. Fix it. He never asked. He assumed since June I had been his shadow analyst. When he was promoted to regional director at Greystone, he was woefully underqualified. He knew how to talk, how to shake hands, and how to order expensive wine, but he did not know how to read a profit and loss statement. He could not spot a liability if it was printed in neon red ink. So I did it for him. I remembered a night 3 months ago. It was 2:00 in the morning. Derek had sent me his quarterly projection deck that he was supposed to present to the board the next day. It was a disaster. The formulas were broken. He had projected a 40% growth based on revenue streams that did not exist. If he had presented that deck, he would have been laughed out of the room or worse, fired for incompetence. I stayed up until dawn fixing it. I recalculated the margins. I adjusted the projections to be realistic but optimistic. I wrote the script he memorized. He got a standing ovation from the executive team. He called me afterward, not to say thank you, but to brag. They loved it. Harper, I crushed it. Dad is going to be so proud. I had said nothing. I let him have the win. That was my rule. I help in the dark. I do not need the applause. I just wanted to make sure he did not crash and burn, because if he did, the wreckage would fall on my parents, and inevitably they would come to me to clean that up too. But generosity has a limit, and Derek had found it 2 weeks ago. It involved a vendor for his Client Appreciation Week, a massive event he organized to impress the top accounts. He had hired a high-end audiovisual company to set up the stage and lighting. The deposit was $6,000. Derek forgot to pay it. The vendor called him 48 hours before the event, threatening to pull the plug. Derek called me in a panic, whispering so his assistant wouldn't hear. Harper, I messed up. The corporate card is maxed out because of the travel expenses. If I ask accounting to wire it now, they will flag me for missing the deadline. You have to wire it. I will pay you back as soon as my bonus clears. I hesitated. $6,000 was not a small amount of money, even for me, but I could hear the terror in his voice. He was my little brother. I wired the money from my personal account. The event went ahead. Derek posted photos on LinkedIn of himself on the stage I had paid for, holding a microphone, looking like a king. 2 weeks passed. No repayment. When I texted him about it last Tuesday, he left me on red. When I brought it up casually on a call, he laughed it off. Relax, Harper. You know I am good for it. Don't be such a miser. You do not have kids or a mortgage. What do you need the cash for right now anyway? That was the moment the wall began to crack. It wasn't about the money. It was the entitlement. It was the assumption that my resources were merely a reservoir for his mistakes. I pulled my car into the driveway of my apartment complex. It was a quiet brick building in a historic neighborhood, modest, solid. It did not have a doorman or a valet, but I owned the unit outright. I owned the unit above me, too, and rented it out. Yet another thing my parents did not know. I unlocked my front door and stepped into the stillness of my sanctuary. The air smelled of vanilla and old paper. I tossed my keys into the bowl and walked straight to my home office. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating the room with a cool blue light. I needed to see it. I needed to see the asset that had turned Wesley Carradine into a hunter at my dinner table. I logged into the secure portal from my holding company, Morello Bay Holdings, LLC. I had acquired the company 4 years ago, almost by accident. I was consulting for a trucking firm in Charleston that was going under. The owner was a good man, but he had been crushed by rising fuel costs and bad loans. When it came time to settle my invoice, he had tears in his eyes. He had no cash. All he had was a derelict transfer station in Savannah, a rusty warehouse, and 2 acres of cracked pavement that sat on a frontage road near the port. He told me it was worthless. The roof leaked. The fences were torn. I took it anyway. I marked my invoices paid and took the deed. I felt bad for him, but then I did my research. I looked at the city planning maps. I looked at the expansion plans for the port of Savannah. I realized that the worthless road on that property was the only straight line between the new container terminal and the interstate highway. Any truck leaving the new terminal had 2 choices: drive 40 minutes north to the way station loop or drive 2 minutes across the property owned by Morello Bay Holdings. For 3 years, I had sat on it. I paid the property taxes. I paid a landscaping crew to keep the weeds down. I waited. I knew Greystone Freight Solutions was expanding. I knew they were buying up property. I had seen the press releases, but I had not connected the dots until tonight. I pulled up the property records on my screen. The Savannah deal Derek had been bragging about was me. He had been negotiating with a ghost. He'd been sending offers to a blind P.O. box in Delaware, getting rejected and getting frustrated, never knowing that the stubborn landlord was the sister he mocked at dinner. Wesley knew, though. I leaned back in my chair, tapping my finger on the desk. Wesley Carradine was a shark, but he was a smart shark. He hadn't brought that contract to dinner just to save time. He had done it to see the look on Derek's face. He had been testing us. He wanted to know if Derek knew. He wanted to see if Derek had the due diligence to know who owned the most critical asset in his acquisition pipeline by revealing it at the table. Wesley had exposed Derek's incompetence in front of his parents, but he had also exposed me. I looked at the file on my screen. The most recent offer from Greystone was sitting in the digital queue. It was low, insultingly low. They were offering $2 million for a property that was worth at least $8 million to their operational efficiency over 5 years. I was about to close the window when something caught my eye. At the bottom of the screen in the activity log, there was a red flag. System alert. Multiple failed login attempts. My stomach tightened. I clicked on the details. Someone had tried to access the digital signature portal from Morello Bay Holdings, the portal I used to authorize heavy transfers and verify deeds. The attempts had happened 3 days ago. The IP address was local. I traced it. It wasn't a sophisticated hack. It wasn't a Russian bot farm. It was a residential IP provider in Raleigh. I cross-referenced the time of the login attempts with my text history. 3 days ago, Tuesday 9:00 at night. I scrolled through my messages. Tuesday 8:58 p.m. A text from Derek. Hey, what is the password you use for the family Netflix account again? The one with the capital letter. I froze. I used a variation of that password for my low security accounts, not for my banking, and certainly not for my business portals. But if someone was guessing, if someone was trying to brute force their way in using variations of Marlowe or my birth year, I looked at the log again. User attempted password Marlowe 1985. User attempted password Harper M. User attempted password Family First One. They were guesses, personal guesses. Derek knew I helped businesses. He knew I handled contracts. He didn't know I owned the land, but he knew I had access to things. Or maybe he knew more than I thought. Had he seen a document on my screen when he visited last month? Had he seen a piece of mail? If he knew I was Marlowe Bay Holdings, why didn't he just ask me to sell unless he didn't want to buy it? I looked at the document Wesley had tried to make me sign. The purchase price had been blank. If I had signed that document blindly as they expected the dumb sister to do, the price could have been filled in later. It could have been filled in as $1 if someone could forge a digital signature. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air outside. This wasn't just about him being a bad brother. This wasn't just about him stealing my money for a vendor deposit. This was about him trying to steal an asset worth millions because he needed a win to save his career. I opened the security settings and enabled a 3-step authentication protocol. I set up a trap notification that would ping my phone the second that IP address tried to ping the server again. I stared at the blinking cursor. My brother had sat across from me tonight eating prime rib, calling me a failure, all while he had been secretly trying to break into my digital life to steal the very thing that gave me power. He didn't just want me to be a failure. He needed me to be one so he could take what was mine. I whispered into the empty room, my voice shaking with a rage I was finally allowing myself to feel. Derek, what exactly were you planning to do with my name? The morning sun hit the pavement outside my office with a glare that felt more like an interrogation light than a new day. My office was located in a converted industrial park on the edge of Raleigh, a modest brick building sandwiched between a dental supply warehouse and a graphic design studio. It was not the kind of place where limousines parked. Yet, when I arrived at 8:45, a sleek black sedan was already idling at the curb. The engine purred with a low, expensive rumble that vibrated in my chest as I unlocked the front door. I did not have a receptionist. I did not have an assistant. I turned on the lights, started the coffee machine, and before the first drop had hit the pot, the bell above my door chimed. Wesley Carradine walked in. He looked different than he had at the dinner table. Without the tuxedo and the social pretense, he looked sharper, more dangerous. He was wearing a navy suit that fit him like armor, and he carried a thick leather folder under his arm. He did not say hello immediately. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate lap around my small reception area. I stayed behind my desk watching him. I did not offer him coffee. I did not offer him a seat. I just waited. He stopped in front of the framed certificates on my wall. There were not many, but they were significant. My certified fraud examiner license, my accreditation and business valuation, a framed letter of thanks from a manufacturing plant in Ohio that I had saved from liquidation 3 years ago. You run a lean operation, Harper, Wesley said, his back still turned to me. No overhead, no fluff, just the work. I prefer it that way, I replied, my voice steady. It keeps the fees lower for the clients who actually need help. Wesley turned around. His eyes swept over my desk, noting the organized stacks of files, the dual monitors, and the complete lack of personal clutter. He nodded as if confirming a hypothesis. 13 years ago, he began, walking toward the chair opposite my desk, but not sitting down yet. I was running a mid-sized transport company called Arrowhead Logistics. We were growing too fast. We had bought 20 new trucks we could not afford, and fuel prices spiked overnight. I was 2 months away from bankruptcy. My board wanted me to lay off 40% of the workforce to stop the bleeding. I remained silent. I knew the story. I knew the company. Wesley placed the leather folder on my desk and slid it toward me. I hired a remote consultant. He continued. a young analyst who refused to meet in person because she said she worked better without the noise of corporate politics. She went through my books for 3 nights straight. She came back with a plan that did not involve firing a single driver. Instead, she found that we were hemorrhaging money through inefficient route planning and a maintenance vendor who was overcharging us by 200%. He tapped the folder with his index finger. I opened it. Inside was a bound report. The paper yellowed slightly with age. The formatting was austere. Helvetica, font 12 point bold headers. It was identical to the reports I produced today. I looked at the cover page, Strategic Cost Reduction Plan Arrowhead Logistics, and at the bottom in small print, prepared by H. Rodriguez. I was 26. I said softly. I was working out of my dorm room while finishing my master's degree. Wesley nodded. You saved my company. Harper, you told me to cut the leaks, not the people. And when I tried to pay you the bonus you deserved, you refused it. You sent me an invoice for the standard hourly rate and added a note that said, and I quote, "Just pay your drivers what they are worth and stop cooking the maintenance logs." He sat down then, leaning back in the chair with a sigh that sounded like it had been held in for a decade. I kept this report on my shelf, he said. It reminded me of what competence looks like. It has no ego. It just solves the problem. He looked me in the eye, and the steely reserve he had maintained at dinner finally cracked, revealing a profound frustration. Last night, when your brother called you a failure, I almost laughed in his face. It was physically painful to sit there and watch that charade. Derek stood there pining like a peacock, taking credit for a company I'd built while calling the woman who taught me how to save it a loser. I closed the folder. Why are you here, Wesley? You did not drive all the way to my office to reminisce about a job I did 13 years ago. No, he said, his voice hardening. I am here because I have a problem and you are the only person who holds the key to solving it. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a fresh document. This one was crisp and white. Greystone is in the middle of a massive merger, he explained. We are acquiring a network of regional warehouses to dominate the Southeast Corridor. The deal is worth $400 million, but the entire logistics map relies on a single transfer point in Savannah. If we do not control at Access Road, the efficiency model collapses and the investors walk away. He pointed to my laptop. You own the choke point. Harper Marlowe Bay. Holdings is you. I nodded. I bought it 4 years ago. It was a distressed asset. I saw the potential. Wesley gave a short, impressed laugh. Derek thinks you are lucky. I know you are strategic. That is why I'm not going to insult you by asking you to sign the paper I brought to dinner. That was a test, and you passed it. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I want to buy the property. Yes, we will pay fair market value. But that is not why I am here. I am here because I need to hire you. I raised an eyebrow. You have an entire compliance department. Wesley, you have Derek. That is exactly the problem, Wesley said grimly. He lowered his voice. Even though we were the only 2 people in the building for the last 10 months, the operational costs at Greystone have been drifting upward. At first, it looked like inflation. Then it looked like bad luck. But 3 weeks ago, I started seeing patterns that looked familiar. They looked like the kind of patterns you pointed out to me 13 years ago at Arrowhead. Duplicate invoices, ambiguous vendor categories, travel expenses that do not match the client logs. My stomach tightened. I thought of the vendor deposit I had paid for Derek. I thought of the lavish lifestyle he had been flaunting. We are under an internal audit, Wesley said. The board is nervous. If we do not clean this up before the merger closes in 6 months, the SEC will tear us apart. I need an independent compliance and integration advisor, someone from outside the company who has no loyalty to the executive team, someone who can look at the numbers and see the story they are hiding. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle in the room. The epicenter of the financial bleed seems to be coming from the Mid-Atlantic division. I felt a coldness spread through my veins. That is Derek's division, I said. Wesley did not blink. Yes, it is. He sat back, watching my reaction. I need you to come inside, Harper. I need you to lead the integration of the new warehouse network, including your own property. That gives you clearance to access every contract, every ledger, and every expense report in the system. I will pay you a retainer of $25,000 a month for 6 months, plus a success fee when the merger closes. He was offering me a fortune, but more than that, he was offering me a weapon. You want me to investigate my own brother. I said flatly, I want you to investigate the truth. Wesley corrected, if Derek is clean, you will prove it and his career is safe. If he is not, he let the sentence hang in the air. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, a delivery truck was backing into the loading dock of the dental supply building. The backup alarm beeped rhythmically. I thought about the way Derek had laughed at me last night. I thought about the way my parents had looked at him with blind worship while he mocked my existence. I thought about the brute force hacking attempts on my server from Tuesday night. Derek was not clean. I knew that. Wesley suspected it, but suspicion was not proof. I turned back to Wesley. I have conditions. I said, name them. First, I answer only to you and the General Counsel, not to HR, not to the CFO, and certainly not to the Regional Director of the Mid-Atlantic. Agreed. Second, my ownership of Marlowe Bay Holdings remains anonymous until the deal is finalized. I do not want Derek to know I am the one selling him the land until the ink is dry. Smart, Wesley said. Agreed. And third, I said, resting my hands on the back of my chair, this is a compliance audit. It is not a hit job. I will follow the numbers where they go. If they lead to Derek, so be it. But I am not doing this to destroy him. I am doing this because I do not sign my name to lies. Wesley stood up and extended his hand. I would not expect anything less from the woman who saved my first company, he said. I shook his hand. His grip was firm and dry. One more thing, Wesley added as he picked up his folder. You should know that Derek has already submitted his expense report for the Christmas dinner. He categorized it as client development. I felt a bitter smile touch my lips. Of course he did, I said. Wesley walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. He put the entire bill on the corporate card. Harper, including the wine, including the room rental. He claimed he was meeting with a high net worth investor to discuss the Savannah acquisition. I looked at Wesley, realizing the trap Derek had built for himself. He was, I said. He just did not realize she was sitting across the table. Wesley gave a rare, genuine smile. See you Monday, Harper. Bring your sharpest pen. When the door closed, I stood in the silence of my office. The sunlight had shifted, cutting across the floor in a sharp angle. I looked at the old report on my desk, the one I had written when I was 26, naive enough to think that good work was all that mattered. I was not naive anymore. I sat down and pulled up my calendar. I had work to do. If I was going into the lion's den, I needed to be ready. I was not going in as Harper the sister or Harper the failure. I was going in as the independent advisor. And for the first time in his life, Derek was going to be held accountable by someone he could not bully into silence. The headquarters of Greystone Freight Solutions was located in Briar Haven, North Carolina, a sprawling campus of glass and steel that looked more like a technology firm than a trucking logistics company. On Monday morning, I walked through the revolving doors, not as Harper, the sister, but as Harper, the independent compliance and integration advisor. The security guard handed me a badge that had my photo and the word external printed in a bold red bar across the bottom. I liked that word. It defined my perimeter. I was here to observe, not to belong. Wesley had set me up in a conference room on the 4th floor, commonly referred to as the war room, during mergers. It was soundproofed and detached from the main bullpen. Within the first hour, I had been introduced to the chief financial officer, the general counsel, and the head of human resources. They were polite, but their smiles were tight. To them, I was a necessary friction, a consultant hired to smooth out the acquisition of the warehouse network. None of them knew I shared a last name with their regional director of the Mid-Atlantic. To them, I was just a mess. Rodriguez from Raleigh, the woman with the reputation for cleaning up messes. I spent the first 2 days building a baseline. I needed to understand the normal rhythm of the company before I could spot the arrhythmia. I requested access to the central server, the shared project drives, and the granular expense management system. By Wednesday afternoon, I had isolated the data for the Mid-Atlantic division. The first thing I looked for was the Savannah Optimization Project. This was the initiative Derek had bragged about at the dinner table, the visionary plan that had supposedly convinced the board to pursue the acquisition of my warehouse. I found the file in a restricted folder. It was a masterpiece of logistics modeling. The slide deck was 70 pages of detailed risk analysis, route simulations, and cost-benefit projections. It was brilliant. It was also completely beyond Derek's intellectual capacity. I right-clicked on the file and opened the metadata properties created by Ethan Cole. Total editing time 140 hours. Last modified by Derek Marlowe. Modification time 10 minutes. I dug deeper into the email archives. I found a thread starting back in August. Ethan Cole, the junior analyst who had been with the company for less than a year, had sent the initial draft to Derek with the subject line proposal for coastal route efficiency. Derek's reply was curt, "Do not share this with anyone yet. I need to review it for strategic alignment. Send me the raw data and delete the draft from the shared drive." Over the next 3 months, the pattern repeated. Ethan would do the work, send it to Derek, and Derek would forward the final product to the executive team with the text, "Here is the concept I have been developing over the weekend. I think this solves our bottleneck." He had erased the boy entirely. He had treated Ethan exactly the way he treated me, a resource to be minded, and then discarded. I made a note in my physical ledger, keeping it offline. Intellectual property theft confirmed. Next, I turned to the money. The expense reports for the Mid-Atlantic division were a labyrinth. At first glance, they looked standard. There were line items for travel, meals, and client entertainment. But when I cross-referenced the dates with the company calendar, the discrepancies began to glow like embers. There was a charge for $4,000 categorized as strategic offsite meeting Aspen. The date for this meeting coincided with a week when there were no client meetings scheduled in Colorado. I pulled the receipt image. It was for a ski lodge. The guest list was not attached, but the room service bill included 4 bottles of champagne and a spa treatment for 2. There was another charge for $2,500 labeled vendor gift. I traced the SKU number on the invoice. It was a designer handbag from a boutique in Charlotte. Greystone's vendor policy strictly limited gifts to $100. Then I found the dinner. The charge for the Silver Peak Lodge was dated December 25th. The total was nearly $8,000. Derek had filed an under-client development Savannah acquisition negotiation. He had expensed our family Christmas dinner. He had expensed the wine he drank while mocking me. He had expensed the very meal where he tried to trick me into signing away my property. The audacity was breathtaking. He wasn't just stealing from the company. He was making the company pay for the stage upon which he performed his abuse. But these were just petty thefts. These were the actions of a greedy man, living beyond his means. What I found next was different. This was systemic. I was analyzing the accounts payable ledger, looking at the recurring payments to subcontractors. These were the smaller trucking companies that Greystone hired to handle overflow during peak seasons. One name stood out: Apex Logistics Support. It was a generic name, the kind that blends in on a spreadsheet. They were billing Greystone for consulting services and freight coordination every month like clockwork. The amounts were always just under the threshold that required a secondary approval signature: $4,500, $4,800. I clicked on the vendor profile. The address was a P.O. box in a strip mall in Greensboro. I followed the money trail. I pulled the wire transfer records from the banking interface. The money from Greystone went to Apex Logistics Support, and within 24 hours, 70% of it was transferred out to a personal credit union account. I knew that credit union. I knew the routing number. I had memorized it 5 years ago when my parents were threatening to lose their house, and I had wired them $15,000 to cover their mortgage arrears. The account belonged to the Stewart and Linda Marlowe Joint Trust. I sat back in my chair, the air in the conference room suddenly feeling very thin. This wasn't just Derek skimming off the top. This was a family business. Derek was using his position to siphon company funds directly into our parents' bank account. The timeline matched perfectly. The payments to Apex started 3 months after Derek got his promotion. It explained everything. It explained why my parents were so desperate to keep Derek on his pedestal. It explained why my father had said, "He is the future of this family." He was their pension plan. He was stealing from his employer to fund their retirement. And they were cheering him on while calling me a failure for earning an honest living. I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a cold, hard clarity. They were all in on it. The dinner wasn't just a social gathering. It was a meeting of accomplices. I printed the wire transfer logs and walked up to the executive suite. Wesley was on a call, but he waved me in immediately. He hung up and looked at my face. "You found it," he said. It was not a question. I placed the paper on his desk. "It is worse than expense fraud, Wesley," I said, keeping my voice low. "He is running a shell company vendor scheme, and the beneficiaries are his parents." Wesley picked up the paper and studied the numbers. He did not look surprised, only resigned. "I suspected the vendor kickbacks," he admitted, "but I could not prove where the money was going once it left the shell account. I did not have your knowledge of the personal banking details." He looked up at me. "I have been tracking the losses for 10 months. Every time I tried to audit the department, Derek would claim I was micromanaging or that the missing funds were due to market volatility. I knew I needed someone who could recognize the personal signature of the fraud." He paused. "I am sorry, Harper. I know this is your family. They forfeited that title a long time ago." I said, "I want to finish this. I need to close the loop on the project theft. I need a witness." Wesley nodded. "Use the small conference room on the second floor. It has no cameras inside, but the hallway is monitored. I will make sure legal is ready when you have the affidavit." I went back down. I looked up Ethan Cole in the employee directory. He was listed as a junior analyst. Cubicle 4B. I sent him a message via the internal chat system. "Ethan, this is Harper Rodriguez, External Compliance. Please meet me in conference room 202 in 10 minutes. Bring your laptop." When Ethan walked in, he looked like he was about to face a firing squad. He was young, maybe 24, with messy hair and a tie that was slightly askew. He clutched his laptop to his chest like a shield. "Sit down, Ethan." I said gently. He sat. "Am I in trouble?" he asked, his voice cracking. "No," I said, "but Derek Marlowe is." Ethan flinched at the name. I turned my laptop around and showed him the metadata from the Savannah Optimization Project. "I know you wrote this, Ethan. I know you did the modeling. I know you did the risk assessment. And I know Derek took my name off the file before he sent it to the board." Ethan looked down at his hands. He did not deny it. "He told me it was standard procedure." Ethan whispered. "He said that junior analysts do not present to the board. He said if I let him pitch it, he would get the budget approved and then he would promote me to senior strategist and give me a $10,000 bonus." "And did he?" I asked. Ethan laughed bitterly. "No. Once the project was approved, he stopped answering my emails. When I asked about the bonus last week, he told me I should be grateful I still had a job and that I needed to be a team player." He looked up at me, his eyes wet with frustration. "He stole 6 months of my life. That model was my idea." I slid a piece of paper across the table. "This is a statement of fact." I said, "I want you to write down exactly what you just told me, dates, times, and the content of the conversations. If you do this, I can guarantee that your name will be put back on the work. You will be recognized as the author of the Savannah Project." "You can do that?" he asked. "I am the one advising the CEO on the integration." I said, "Yes, I can do that." Ethan took the pen. For the first time since he walked in, he looked hopeful. After Ethan left, I spent the rest of the afternoon compiling the final pieces of the puzzle. I had the theft of funds, the theft of intellectual property, and the misuse of company assets. It was enough to fire Derek 10 times over, but as I was archiving the email evidence, I found something that made my blood run cold. I was searching for any external communications Derek had sent to my firm's domain, checking to see if he had ever forwarded sensitive data to me during the months I was helping him. I typed Rodriguez into the search bar. A list of emails populated. Most were the ones I expected, the requests for help he had sent to my real email address, but there was another address in the list. Harper Rodriguez Consuing Calm. I squinted at the screen. At first glance, it looked correct, but then I saw it. My firm's domain was Rodriguez Consulting Com. The email in the system was spelled with a capital I instead of a lowercase l in the word consulting. On a sans-serif screen font, they looked identical. I clicked on the profile. The domain had been registered 3 weeks ago. There were 5 emails sent from this fake address to the accounts payable department at Greystone. I opened one. Subject urgent. Change of wire instructions for vendor payments. Please update the banking details for the Marlowe Bay Holdings acquisition deposit to the attached account effective immediately. Best Harper Rodriguez. I sat frozen. Derek wasn't just trying to get me to sign the deed. He was building the back door. He had created a fake email identity that looked like mine. He was positioning himself to intercept the purchase funds if the deal went through, or perhaps to authorize things in my name without my knowledge. He was impersonating me. I checked the IP address of the sender. It was the same residential IP that had tried to hack my portal on Tuesday. This was no longer just corporate fraud. This was identity theft. I whispered into the silence of the war room. Derek, you did not just cross a line. You erased it. I picked up the phone and dialed Wesley's direct line. We need to lock down the accounts payable server. I said, now, and do not let Derek leave the building. The vibration of my phone against the hardwood desk was relentless. It was not a ringtone. It was a drilling sound, a constant insect-like buzzing that seemed determined to fracture the silence of my workspace. I had set my phone to silent mode, but Derek was not the kind of person who accepted silence as an answer. He viewed it as a technical difficulty on the line, something to be overcome by sheer volume of attempts. I looked at the screen. Derek, then Mom, then Dad, then Derek again. The notifications stacked up like bricks in a wall they were trying to build around me. Finally, I picked up. I did not say hello. Harper, thank God. Derek's voice came through breathless and fast. He sounded like he was pacing. I have been trying to reach you for 2 hours. Where are you? I am working. Derek, I said calmly, which is what you should be doing. Listen to me, he snapped, his tone shifting instantly from relief to command. I need you to do something. It is simple. I need you to send an email to HR. Just a quick note. Tell them that you and I have been collaborating on the Savannah project for months. Tell them you provided the raw data and I did the strategy. I closed my eyes. He was trying to rewrite the history of Ethan Cole's work. He wanted me to be his alibi for the intellectual property theft. I cannot do that. I said, why not? He demanded, you help me all the time. You fixed the Q3 deck. You paid the vendor. This is the same thing. Just say you were a silent partner. It makes sense. You are a consultant. It covers the gaps in the edit logs. It is not the same thing. Derek, I helped you fix your mistakes. I will not help you steal credit for someone else's labor. Harper, do not be self-righteous. You are going to ruin me. If they think I farmed out the strategy to a junior analyst, I lose the bonus. I lose the promotion. And if I lie for you, I lose my license. I said. The line went quiet for a second, and then his voice dropped, becoming low and venomous. You are enjoying this, aren't you? You have always been jealous. You want to see me fail so you can finally feel big. I hung up. 10 seconds later, the phone buzzed again. Mom, I knew I should not answer. I knew the script by heart, but some part of me, the part that was still a little girl wanting to be seen, pressed the green button. Harper, my mother sobbed. She did not even say my name. She just wailed it. How could you? Your brother is sick with worry. He says you are working with the people who are trying to fire him. I am doing my job. Mom, your job is to support your family. She screamed. Her voice cracked. We are a team. We survive together. Derek is the only one who takes care of us. He is the one who pays for the trips. He is the one who is going to pay off the house. If he loses this job, we lose everything. He is stealing. Mom, I said, my voice trembling slightly. He is creative, she retorted. That is how business works. You are too rigid. You always have been. You with your little rules and your little ledgers. You do not understand how the real world operates. You have to bend things to survive. Give the phone to your father." I said. There was a shuffling sound, and then my father's voice came on. It was cold, detached, the voice of a judge passing a sentence. "Fix this. Harper. Depp. He has embezzled company funds. I do not want to hear the technicalities." He cut me off. "Your brother has potential. He has a future. He is going to be a CEO one day. You are a worker bee. That is fine. We accept that. Oh, but do not drag the queen down just because you cannot fly." The metaphor was so absurd, so cruel, that I almost laughed. "He is not a queen, Dad. He is a criminal. You are dead to us if he loses this job." My father said. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time listening to the silence of the room. It hurt. Of course it hurt. But it was a clean pain. It was the pain of a bone breaking so it could finally be set right. They had drawn the line in the sand. They had chosen their side. They had chosen the lie because the lie paid the bills. I looked at the file on my screen. Apex Logistics Support, the shell company, the wire transfers to my parents' trust. My father knew exactly where the money came from. He wasn't defending Derek's potential. He was defending his own income stream. At noon, Derek texted me. "Starbucks on 4th in Maine. 15 minutes or I come to the office and make a scene." I went. The cafe was crowded with the lunch rush, the air thick with the smell of roasted beans and wet raincoats. Derek was sitting at a corner table. He looked terrible. His tie was loosened. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was tapping his foot against the floor leg with a nervous, frantic energy. He did not stand up when I approached. He slid a piece of paper across the table before I had even pulled out my chair. "Read this," he said. I looked at the paper. It was a typed script. "To whom it may concern, I, Harper Rodriguez, verify that I have acted as an external advisor to Derek Marlowe regarding the Savannah Optimization Project. The concepts presented were a result of our joint brainstorming sessions." I pushed the paper back. "I am not signing this. Derek," he leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "I will pay you," he hissed. "I will pay you double whatever fee you want. I know you like money. I will wire you the $6,000 for the vendor thing today. Cash." I looked at him, really looked at him. He was desperate. He was a man who had built a castle out of playing cards and was now terrified of a stiff breeze. "It is not about the $6,000. I said. "Then what do you want?" he demanded. "You want an apology. Fine. I am sorry. I am sorry I called you a failure. I am sorry I made fun of your job. Is that enough? Can we move on now?" It was so hollow. He thought words were just currency, coins to be traded to get what he wanted. "I want to know about Apex Logistics," I said. Derek froze. His face went pale. "Then read." "Why know about the shell company?" "Derek, I know you set it up. I know you are funneling under-the-table payments to Mom and Dad's trust fund every month." He laughed. A sharp, nervous bark. "You are crazy. You are reading too many spy novels." "I have the bank records," I said quietly. "I have the IP logs. I traced the wire transfers." He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. Then the fear in his eyes hardened into something uglier. "Thus, so you were spying on me. You used your little access to dig up dirt on your own family. You are pathetic." "I am investigating fraud," I said, "and I found it." Derek leaned back, crossing his arms. A smirk played on his lips. "You won't turn that in. You can't if you report that. Mom and Dad go down, too. They are beneficiaries. Do you want to see Dad in handcuffs? Do you want to see Mom on the news?" He was using them as human shields. He knew I had spent my life trying to please them, trying to buy their love. He was betting that I was still that desperate little girl. "I am not the one who put them in danger. Derek, you are." He waved a hand dismissively. "They deserve that money. They raised us. They supported me. It is a return on investment." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And speaking of investments, let's talk about the real issue. Let's talk about Marlowe Bay." My breath caught in my throat. I had not told him. Wesley had not told him. "Oh, don't look so surprised." Derek sneered. I did some digging too. It took me a while, but I found the registered agent for the LLC. You think you are so clever, hiding behind a corporate veil. But I know it is you. You are holding the road hostage. He tapped the table with his finger. Here is the deal. Harper, you are going to sign the transfer deed for the warehouse. You are going to sign it over to Greystone for the original offer price, $2 million. The property is worth $8 million. I said automatically. Not to me, he said. To me, it is worth my job. You sign that deed, and I get to close the deal. I look like a hero. The board forgets about the little accounting errors because I delivered the crown jewel. He paused, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Consider it your contribution. You owe us. You have been hoarding that asset while Mom and Dad struggle. If you sign it, I will make sure they know you helped. I will tell them you saved the family. Isn't that what you want? To be the hero for once. I looked at my brother. I saw the manipulation, the entitlement, the absolute lack of moral compass. He truly believed that my property, my hard work, my assets were just extensions of his own inventory. I stood up. I do not owe you a damn thing, Derek. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was hard. If you walk away, he hissed, I will make your life a living hell. I will tell everyone you used your position to insider trade. I will tell them you stole confidential data. Who are they going to believe? The successful director or the jealous sister? I pulled my arm free. They are going to believe the evidence, I said. I walked out of the cafe. My wrist throbbed where he had grabbed me. I did not look back, but I could feel his eyes boring into my spine. That night, the storm broke. Rain lashed against the windows of my apartment, turning the world outside into a blurred gray smear. I sat in my home office, the only light coming from my 3 monitors. I had set up a perimeter. I knew Derek was desperate. Desperate men do stupid things. At 10:00, the alert chimed. It was a soft sound, a ping that echoed in the quiet room. I looked at the center monitor. The security dashboard for my digital signature provider was flashing red. Alert: unauthorized access attempt detected. Target private key. H. Rodriguez. Action document signing request. Someone was trying to access my cloud-based digital signature. They were trying to bypass the password and execute a signature on a pending document. I opened the log. The attacker was using a credential stuffing tool, firing hundreds of password combinations a second at the firewall. It was a brute force attack, crude, aggressive. I watched the lines of code scroll by. They were trying to sign a document labeled Transfer Deed Marlowe Bay Final PDF. He wasn't waiting for me to agree. He was trying to forge my signature electronically. If he succeeded, he could submit the document to Greystone's legal team in the morning, claimed the deal was closed, and by the time I contested it, the merger would be moving forward and the money would be in his control. I typed rapidly, my fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. Command lockdown. Action: revoke all active tokens. Action: enable biometric requirement. I severed the connection. The red flashing stopped. The attack was blocked. Then I initiated the trace. I needed to know where he was. If he was at home, it was a personal crime. But if he was somewhere else, I ran the packet capture script I had prepared earlier. I filtered out the noise. I isolated the source IP address of the attacker. The numbers resolved on the screen. IP address 1045 to go 88 ISB Greystone. Corporate network node GB, admin workstation 04. My heart hammered against my ribs. He was not at home. He was at the office. He was using his corporate computer, the one issued to him by Greystone, to try and hack the external auditor hired to investigate him. He was so arrogant, so convinced of his own immunity, that he didn't even bother to hide his digital footprint. Or perhaps he thought that because he was a director, the IT security rules didn't apply to him. iPhone lit up on the desk. A text message. Derek, you do not understand who you are fighting. You are just a speed bump. I will go through you. I looked at the text. Then I looked at the screen where his IP address was glowing and neon green. He was right about one thing. I was not a speed bump. I took a screenshot of the log. I saved the packet trace. I exported the file to an encrypted drive. I whispered to the empty room, feeling the cold, final resolve settle over me. I am not a speed bump. Derek, I am the wall. And you just drove straight into it at full speed. The fluorescent lights of the war room hummed with a low electric buzzing sound that seemed to drill directly into my temples. It was Tuesday morning, 3 days after the dinner at Silver Peak Lodge, and the silence in the office was deceptive. To the rest of the employees at Greystone Freight Solutions, it was just another Tuesday. To me, it was the calm before a controlled demolition. I logged into the secure shared drive that the IT department had isolated for my audit. I expected to see the usual folders: expenses, vendor contracts, payroll logs. Instead, I saw a new folder sitting at the top of the directory, created at 3:00 in the morning the previous night. The folder was named External Consultation Logs Confidential. My stomach gave a small cold lurch. I had not created that folder. I double-clicked it. Inside were 20 PDF files formatted to look like email chains. I opened the first one, from Harper Rodriguez at rodriguez.com to Derek Marlowe, Greystone Freight. Com date September 14th. Subject: Rebudget Allocation Strategy. Derek, regarding the excess funds from the Q3 marketing budget, I recommend we channel them through the Apex Logistics vendor account. We can classify it as prepaid consultation to avoid the CAPEX triggers. This should clear the way for the bonuses. Just make sure the invoices are under $5,000 to bypass the secondary approval signature. Best Harper. I stared at the screen. The blood drained from my face, leaving my skin cold. The email was a fabrication, a clumsy theatrical forgery. The tone was wrong. I never used phrases like bypass secondary approval in writing. It sounded like a bad movie script written by someone who thought they knew how white-collar crime worked. I opened the next one and the next. There were dozens of them. They painted a clear, damning picture. According to these files, I was not the auditor. I was the architect. They suggested that I had been coaching Derek for months on how to embezzle money from the company, using my knowledge of compliance loopholes to help him steal. I understood his play immediately. It was the mutually assured destruction defense. If he went down, he was going to drag me down with him. He wanted to make it look like the external investigator was actually a co-conspirator. If Greystone tried to fire him, he would release these emails claiming that the entire audit was a sham designed to cover our tracks. He was banking on the company being so terrified of the scandal that they would bury the whole thing and let him walk away with a severance package. I did not slam my laptop shut. I did not scream. I did not call him. I went to work. I opened the digital forensics toolkit on my secure drive. I needed to prove these were fake, and I needed to do it before lunch. I right-clicked on the source file for the emails. I selected View Header Information. Derek had made a critical error. He had created these emails by using a spoofing tool that generated a PDF output, but he had uploaded them to the server from a single location. I looked at the creation time stats. File 1 created 3:14 CAAM. File 2 created 3:15 AM. File 3 created 3:16 AM. He had generated 6 months of correspondence in 20 minutes. Real email chains have messy metadata. They have different server routings, different encoding standards depending on the device used, and inconsistent time gaps. These were sterile. They were identical twins born 1 minute apart, but I needed more than just timestamps. I needed to link the fake domain to him. I pulled up the registry information for rodriguezconsulting.com. The capital I trick was still there, mocking me. The domain was registered through a shell service in Panama that promised anonymity. Most people would stop there, but I knew that anonymity services required a recovery email address in case the user lost their password. I ran a reverse query on the domain's DNS records looking for the SSOA, the start of authority record. Sometimes lazy registrars left the administrative contact email visible in the raw data. It was redacted. I tried a different angle. I looked at the payment confirmation code embedded in the receipt data that Derek had foolishly saved in his own personal folder on the company drive, the same folder where he kept his fantasy football rosters. I cross-referenced the transaction ID. The domain had been paid for using a prepaid Visa card. Smart. But the account creation for the domain registrar required a mobile verification. I ran the masked phone number through a breach database tool I used for background checks. It was a burner act number, untraceable. I leaned back, frustrated. He had covered his tracks better than I expected. Then I saw it. A tiny, insignificant detail in the password recovery logs for the spoofing software he had used. When he set up the account to generate the fake emails, the system had asked for a backup email. The address listed was demar89yahoo.com. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. Demars in 89. It was the email address Derek had used in high school. It was the email address he used for his Xbox Live account. It was the email address he used to sign up for the family newsletter that Aunt Marlene sent out every Christmas. He had fallen back on muscle memory. In the middle of the night, exhausted and panicked, he had typed in the email address he had known for 15 years instead of creating a new one. He had signed his own confession. I exported the logs. I took screenshots of the timestamps. I highlighted the recovery email address. I built a chain of custody so that a first-year law student could win the case. I did not go to Human Resources. HR was porous. HR gossiped, and I knew Derek had charmed the VP of HR with his future CEO act. I walked straight to the office of the General Counsel. His name was Marcus Thorne. He was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite, with a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting the company shield. I placed the flash drive on his desk. "We have a problem, Marcus," I said, "and it is not just embezzlement anymore. It is fabrication of evidence and criminal impersonation." Marcus listened as I walked him through the forensic trail. He looked at the fake emails. He looked at the recovery address. He looked at the timestamps. When I finished, he did not look angry. He looked lethal. "He is trying to blackmail the audit," Marcus said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "He thinks if he throws enough mud, we will be too afraid to clean it up." He picked up his phone and dialed a 4-digit extension. "Wesley, can you come to legal? We have a situation, capital S." 10 minutes later, Wesley Carradine was looking at the evidence. His face was gray. "He is my employee," Wesley said softly. "I promoted him. I invited him to my house. He is a cancer, Wesley," Marcus said, "and we need to cut him out before he metastasizes." I spoke up. "We cannot just fire him. If we fire him now, he will leak these fake emails to the press. He will claim wrongful termination and whistleblower retaliation. He will say we fired him because he refused to go along with my illegal schemes." Wesley looked at me. "So what do? "We hold a hearing," I said. "A formal recorded internal tribunal. We let him present his evidence. We let him put these fake emails on the record. We let him lie under oath. And then once he has committed to the lie, we show him the logs. We show him the timestamps. We show him the recovery email." Marcus nodded. "We trap him. We get him to perjure himself in an official corporate proceeding. Then we do not just fire him for cause. We hand the transcript to the district attorney." It was brutal. It was necessary. Just as we were finalizing the plan, my cell phone rang. It was an unknown number with a Georgia area code. I answered it on speaker. "Hello, MS. Rodriguez. This is Ben Miller from Savannah Port Authority." "Yes, Mr. Miller. How can I help you?" "I just wanted to double-check something before we process the filing." He said, "We received the amended terms for the easement on the Marlow Bay property, the document you sent over this morning." I froze. I did not send any document. "Mr. Miller," there was a pause on the line. "That is strange," he said. "I have a PDF here, grant of easement and right of way. It authorizes Greystone Freight Solutions to begin construction on the access road immediately prior to the final sale. It has your signature on it." "Do not process that file," I said, my voice sharp. "That is a forgery. I am locking the deed. If you touch that property, I will sue the Port Authority for negligence." Okay, he stammered. "I will flag it. But MS. Rodriguez, the signature looks real. It has the notary seal and everything. Send it to me now." I hung up. 2 minutes later, the email arrived. I opened the attachment. It was a scanned document. At the bottom, there was my signature, Harper Rodriguez. It looked perfect. The loop of the H, the sharp cross of the T. But I knew my hand. I pulled up a copy of my actual notarized signature from my driver's license renewal. I zoomed in on the image from the Port Authority. I looked at the pen pressure. When I write, I press hard on the downstrokes. The ink bleeds slightly into the paper. The signature on the PDF was uniform. The lines were the same thickness all the way through. It lacked the dynamic variation of a human hand. It was a trace. Someone had taken a high-resolution photo of my signature, perhaps from the Christmas card I sent to my parents last year, and used digital software to overlay it onto the document, but they had messed up the slant. My signature tilts 12 to the right. This one was perfectly vertical, as if the person pasting it had used the automatic alignment tool in Photoshop to straighten it out. "Derek," I whispered, "you are so lazy. Even in your crimes, you cut corners." He was trying to steal the land out from under me before the hearing. He wanted to give Greystone the road so that, even if he got fired, the deal would be done, and he could claim he delivered the asset. I looked up at Wesley and Marcus. He just tried to file a forged deed with a government agency. I said, "That is a felony." Marcus picked up the phone again. "Secure the evidence room," he told his secretary, "and call security. I want the executive conference room swept for bugs." "We are doing this tomorrow." Later that afternoon, I met Ethan Cole in the stairwell. He looked nervous, constantly checking over his shoulder. "He knows something is happening," Ethan whispered. "He is walking around the office telling people that he is about to close the biggest deal in company history. He told the sales team that he has leverage over the external auditor." "What exactly did he say?" I asked. "He said." Ethan hesitated. "He said, I just have to drag Harper into the mud a little bit. She is family. She won't fight back, and the company won't dare make a scene if it involves their own consultant. They will just pay us both off to go away. He thinks I am collateral damage." I said, "He thinks you are a pawn." Ethan corrected. He laughed about it. He said you were too weak to play the game. I felt a cold calm settle over me. It was the same feeling I had when I looked at a balance sheet and found the error that would save a company. It was the certainty of truth. Derek had spent his whole life thinking the world was a stage where he was the main character, and everyone else was a prop. He thought he could write the script. He thought he could direct the ending. He did not realize that he was not the director. He was the villain in a story that was about to end. I went back to my temporary desk. An inter-office envelope was waiting for me. I opened it. Inside was a formal invitation. Confidential notice of hearing subject. Derek Marlowe. Internal Compliance Review. Date Wednesday, December 30th. Time 9 in the morning. Location Executive Boardroom. The note. Witness observation will be conducted from the adjacent viewing gallery. Executive Boardroom B was the room with the one-way mirror. It was used for focus groups and high-stakes negotiations. I ran my thumb over the embossed Greystone logo on the letterhead. Tomorrow, Derek would walk into that room wearing his best suit. He would bring his forged emails. He would bring his arrogance. He would sit down thinking he was about to negotiate a settlement. He would have no idea that on the other side of the glass, I would be watching. I would be the silent witness to his destruction. And this time I would not be the one looking down at the table. I would be the one holding the pen. The viewing gallery was a narrow windowless strip of space running the length of Executive Boardroom B. It was kept dark to ensure the one-way mirror remained opaque from the other side, and the air conditioner hummed with a quiet industrial persistence. I sat alone in a swivel chair, my hands folded in my lap, watching the brightly lit stage where my brother's career was about to undergo a controlled demolition. At 9:00 in the morning exactly, the double doors of the boardroom opened. Derek walked in. He looked impeccable. He was wearing a charcoal three-piece suit that I knew cost $2,000 because I had seen the charge on his expense report under the category of uniform and safety gear. His hair was perfectly gelled. He carried a slim leather portfolio and walked with the bouncy, energetic stride of a man who believed he was there to negotiate a bonus or perhaps to slap a few wrists and move on. He did not look like a man facing an inquisitor. He looked like he was there to sell a vision. The panel was already seated. Wesley sat in the center. To his right was the chief financial officer, a woman named Eleanor, who treated spreadsheets like holy scripture. To his left were the vice president of human resources and Marcus Thorne, the general counsel. They did not stand up when Derek entered. They did not smile. Derek pulled out the chair at the head of the table opposite them. He placed his portfolio down and clasped his hands, flashing a bright practice smile. "Good morning, everyone," Derek said. His voice was projected, confident. "I appreciate you all making time. I know there have been some questions about the Mid-Atlantic numbers, and I have prepared a short presentation to clear up the confusion. It is all about the accelerated growth strategy we implemented in Q3. He reached for his portfolio to pull out his papers. Marcus Thorne spoke first. His voice was dry and devoid of any warmth. "Do not open that, Derek. This is not a presentation." Derek paused, his hand hovering over the leather flap. He laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Marcus, come on. If this is about the budget variance, I can explain it in 5 minutes. We had to spend money to secure the Savannah deal. You have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, right?" "We are not here to talk about eggs," Wesley said. He leaned forward, placing a single thick binder on the table. "We are here to talk about the theft of intellectual property, embezzlement, wire fraud, and the fabrication of evidence." Derek blinked. The smile did not leave his face immediately. It just froze there like a mask that had lost its elasticity. "I am sorry," Derek said. "Those are heavy words." Wesley Eliner, the CFO, pressed a button on the console in front of her. The large screen behind Derek flickered to life. It showed 2 documents side by side. On the left was the original metadata for the Savannah optimization project, authored by Ethan Cole. On the right was the version Derek had submitted to the board. "We interviewed Mr. Cole yesterday," Eliner said. "He provided a sworn affidavit along with the original email chains where you ordered him to delete his drafts. You took the work of a junior analyst, stripped his name from it, and claimed 70 hours of modeling credit for yourself to secure your promotion." Derek waved a hand, dismissing the screen without even turning to look at it. "Ethan is a kid," Derek said, his tone condescending. "I managed him. I directed the strategy. The manager always puts their name on the team's work. That is standard corporate procedure. If he is whining about credit, that is an HR issue, not a legal one. It became a legal issue when you claimed the performance bonus attached to that specific intellectual property," Marcus said. Derek shifted in his seat. "Okay, fine. If you want to give the kid a few thousand, do it. Take it out of my departmental budget. I am focusing on the big picture here. Let us talk about the budget then." Eliner said. The screen changed. It was now a spreadsheet of his expenses. Rows of high-end restaurants, 5-star resorts, and luxury goods were highlighted in red. "Can you explain why you charged $4,000 for a ski trip to Aspen during a week when we have no clients in Colorado?" Eliner asked. Derek did not flinch. "Networking. I was meeting with a potential investor. High net worth individuals do not meet in coffee shops, Eliner. They meet on the slopes." "Name the investor," Wesley said. Derek hesitated. It was confidential. He requested anonymity because he does not exist. Wesley said, "We checked the flight logs. You took your girlfriend. You expensed her lift ticket as client entertainment." Derek's jaw tightened. "This is petty. You are auditing me over a few thousand when I'm about to bring in a multi-million-dollar asset. I am closing the Savannah deal. Do you know what that is worth?" "We know what it is worth," Wesley said, "and we know who you are paying." The screen changed again. This time it showed the banking trace. Apex Logistics Support, the transfers to the Stuart and Linda Marlowe Joint Trust. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Derek stared at the screen. He pulled at his collar. "That is a legitimate vendor," he said, his voice losing its projection. "They provide consultation, logistic support." "They are your parents, Derek," Wesley said. "You set up a shell company to funnel $48,000 of Greystone money into your parents' personal bank account over the last 6 months. That is not networking. That is grand larceny." Derek stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You are twisting everything," he shouted. His composure was cracking, revealing the panicked aggression underneath. "My family has been advising me on the industry for years. My father is a veteran of this business. I paid them for their expertise. You paid them to pay their mortgage, Marcus said calmly. We have the mortgage heiresses' notices that match the dates of the transfers perfectly. Derek looked around the room, his eyes darting from face to face. He realized the sales pitch wasn't working. He realized the charm wasn't working. So he went for the nuclear option. He reached into his portfolio and pulled out a stack of papers. He threw them onto the table. You want to talk about advice. You want to talk about who told me to do this. He pointed a shaking finger at the papers. Ask your precious consultant. Ask Harper Rodriguez. I watched from behind the glass. My heart rate did not spike. I felt a cold clinical detachment, like a surgeon watching a tumor biopsy. She told me how to do it. Derek yelled. She is the compliance expert, right? She set up the shell company. She told me how to code the expenses so they would bypass the audit triggers. Look at the emails. She was jealous that I was the successful one. So she tried to entrap me. She wanted to ruin me so she could swoop in and be the hero. Marcus Thorne reached out and picked up the papers. He did not look at them. He looked at Derek. We have seen these, Marcus said. Then you know, Derek said, a desperate hope entering his voice. She is the one you should be firing. She played us both. Marcus pressed a button on his laptop. The screen behind Derek changed for the final time. It displayed a security log. Use a DIT. Marlow. Location Building C. Office 404. Time Tuesday 3:14 in the morning. Below that was a video feed. It was grainy, black and white footage from the hallway camera outside Derek's office. It showed Derek in his pajamas and a hoodie swiping his badge to enter the building in the middle of the night. And next to that, the smoking gun, the password recovery log for the fake email generator linked to Demar89 Yahoo. Tom, we know these emails are fake, Derek Marcus said. We know because we watched you make them. Derek looked at the screen. He looked at the timestamp. He looked at his own high school email address projected in high definition. The silence that followed was total. It was the sound of a reality shattering. You forged evidence to frame an external auditor. Marcus continued. You tried to impersonate her. You tried to implicate her in your crimes. That takes this beyond termination. That is obstruction of justice. Derek sank back into his chair. He looked small. The suit that had looked so expensive 10 minutes ago now looked like a costume that didn't fit. I didn't. He stammered. Why? Wesley asked. It was not an angry question. It was a sad one. Why did you do it? Derek. You had a good salary. You had a future. Why steal? Derek put his head in his hands. Then he looked up, and his face was twisted with a mixture of rage and pathetic misery because it was never enough. He snapped. He looked at Wesley, his eyes wet. You do not know my parents. You do not know what it is like every month. It was something else. The roof is leaking. The car broke down. Dad made a bad investment. They called me every day. Derek, you are the successful one. Derek, fix it. Derek, do not let the neighbors see we are struggling. He slammed his hand on the table. I needed the money. My salary was maxed out paying their credit card bills. I had to keep up appearances. I had to be the golden boy. If I stopped paying, they would have looked at me the way they look at Harper, like a failure. I sat in the dark gallery listening to him confess. He was blaming them. He was blaming the very people he had demanded I respect. He wasn't stealing for greed. He was stealing for validation. He was stealing to buy the love that they only gave to the highest bidder. And Harper Wesley asked, why try to destroy her? Derek laughed a broken, wet sound. Because she has always been the smart one. I knew she would figure it out. She always figures it out. I just wanted to. I wanted to have leverage if I could make her look dirty. She couldn't tell on me. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. Please, Wesley, I can pay it back. I can work for free. Just do not call the police. My dad, it would kill him. Wesley stood up. He buttoned his jacket. Your father is not my concern. Derek, my company is. Wesley looked at the head of HR. Terminate him. Effective immediately causes fraud, theft, and gross misconduct. Marcus added, we are also filing a civil suit to recover the funds from both you and the Stuart and Linder Marlowe Trust. The police report has already been filed regarding the forgery. We are handing over the evidence packet this afternoon. two security guards stepped into the room. They had been waiting in the hall. "Please," Derek stood up, knocking his chair over. "You cannot do this. I am a director. I am closing the Savannah deal. You are trespassing." Marcus said, "Escort him out. Take his badge. Take his phone. Do not let him touch a computer." The guards grabbed Derek by the arms. He did not fight, but he went limp, stumbling as they dragged him toward the door. "Which?" Derek screamed, looking back at the empty mirror as if he knew I was there. Harper, help me. Tell them." The doors closed. The room went silent again. Wesley took a deep breath and sat down heavily. He looked at the mirror. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I sat in the swivel chair, staring at the empty room. My hands were still folded in my lap. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. Revenge stories always make the ending sound like a celebration, like a victory lap. It wasn't a victory. It was just a cessation of noise. It was the silence after a car crash. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. The screen lit up in the dark room. Mom, she must have heard. Derek must have used his one allowed call. Or maybe the security guards had already marched him out into the parking lot, where he called her from his personal cell. I opened the message. "You have killed your brother. You have destroyed this family. I hope you are happy now. You ungrateful, jealous little witch. Do not ever come home." I read the text twice. I thought about the wire transfers. I thought about the years of being called a failure while I quietly paid their bills. I thought about Derek screaming my name as he was dragged out, expecting me to save him from the consequences of his own actions. I typed a reply. "I did not kill him. Mom, I just turned on the lights." I hesitated, then deleted the draft. They wouldn't understand. They would never understand. To them, the truth was just an inconvenience. I put the phone back in my pocket. I stood up and smoothed my skirt. I walked to the door of the observation gallery and stepped out into the bright, sterile hallway. The door clicked shut behind me. It was a heavy sound, the sound of a vault closing. I was done. The audit was over. But the deal, the real deal, was still on the table. And for the first time in my life, I was the only one holding the pen. The drive to Aunt Marlene's house was a journey back in time. She lived in an older part of Raleigh in a brick colonial that smelled of lemon polish and dust. Unlike the sterile luxury of the Silver Peak Lodge, this house was filled with the clutter of a life, lived long and loud. But tonight, the silence inside was heavy enough to crush a lung. It had been 4 days since the hearing, 4 days since Derek had been escorted out of the building, 4 days since my mother had texted me that I was dead to her. Yet here we were. Marlene had summoned us. And in the Kessler-Marlowe family, when Aunt Marlene summoned you, you showed up. I walked into the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the one with the gold rim that chipped if you looked at it too hard. My parents, Stuart and Linder, were already seated on one side. They did not look up when I entered. They were staring at their empty plates with a mixture of grief and simmering rage. Derek was there, too. He was sitting next to Mom. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was wearing a faded polo shirt and jeans, looking unshaven and smaller than I had ever seen him. He looked like a balloon that had lost its helium. When he saw me, he sneered, a reflex action that had no real power behind it anymore. I took the seat opposite them alone. Marlene Kessler stood at the head of the table. She was 72 years old, a woman made of sharp angles and iron gray hair. She had never married, never had children, and she had spent 40 years working as a head librarian. She knew how to keep the secret, and she knew how to demand silence. "Eat," Marlene commanded. We ate pot roast and carrots. The fork scraped against the porcelain. No one spoke. The air was so thick with unsaid accusations that it felt hard to swallow. When the plates were cleared, Marlene did not bring out dessert. She reached under the table and pulled out a metal lockbox. She placed it on the lace tablecloth with a heavy thud. "We are not here to fight," Marlene said, her voice dried and crisp. "We are here to do accounting." She opened the box. It was full of papers, old receipts, bank statements, letters. My mother sniffed, wiping her eyes with a napkin. "Marlene, please. We are going through enough. Derek has lost everything. Harper has humiliated us. Do we really need to dig up the past?" Marlene ignored her. She picked up a stack of papers clipped together. 3 years ago, Marlene said, looking at me, I was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. The treatment was aggressive. My insurance capped out after the second round of chemo. The bills were piling up. I was preparing to sell this house to pay for the hospital stay. I kept my face impassive. I knew where this was going. Then Marlene continued. The hospital administrator called me. She said an anonymous donor had covered the balance, $82,000. She said it was a grant from a private charitable trust. Marlene slid the paper across the table toward my parents. I did some digging last week. I called in a favor with a friend on the hospital board. There was no trust. The checks came from a personal account. My father frowned. Who has that kind of money? Marlene pointed a long bony finger at me. She did. My parents turned their heads slowly to look at me. Derek's mouth opened slightly. Harper, my mother whispered, you paid for Marlene's cancer treatment. I took a sip of water. She needed it. It has it. It was not a debate. Why didn't you tell us? My father asked, his voice suspicious. Why hide it? Because I knew you would ask for a loan if you knew I had it. I thought, but I said nothing. Marlene pulled out another document. Caleb, she said. My cousin Caleb, who had been sitting quietly at the far end of the table, looked up. He was a good man, a landscaper who worked with his hands. 2 years ago, your equipment was stolen. Marlene said, you were going to go bankrupt. You applied for a loan and got denied. Then, suddenly, a private investor stepped in. Interest-free. No repayment schedule until you were profitable. Caleb looked at me, his eyes wide. That was you. I thought it was an angel investor from Charlotte. It was Harper, Marlene said. $40,000 to save your business. The room was spinning for my family. Their narrative was crumbling for decades. They had told themselves and everyone else that I was the stingy one, the failure, the one who hoarded her pennies while Derek was the generous, successful Sun King. Now they were finding out that the foundation they stood on was paid for by the person they despised. Derek let out a bitter laugh. So what? She has money. We know that now. She owns the warehouse. She is rich. Good for her. Does that make her a saint? She still destroyed my career. Marlene slammed her hand on the table. The silverware jumped. She did not destroy your career. Derek, you did. And you did it with money that should have been hers to begin with. Marlene reached deep into the box and pulled out a yellow legal document. It smelled of old paper and betrayal. This is your grandfather's will, Marlene said. My father stiffened. Marlene, put that away. That is ancient history. It is relevant history. Marlene snapped. She opened the document. Dad left a specific education and business trust for his grandchildren. She read, $100,000 for Derek, $100,000 for Harper to be accessed upon their 18th birthdays or for the purpose of starting a career. She looked at me. Harper, did you ever receive your $100,000? I shook my head. No. When I turned 18, Dad told me there was no money. He said Grandpa lost it all in bad stocks before he died. I went to college on student loans. I worked 3 jobs. Marlene turned her gaze to my father. It was a look of pure disgust. But there was money, wasn't there, Stuart? My father's face turned a mottled red. He crossed his arms. We had to make a decision, he said, his voice defensive. Derek got into that private university. The tuition was astronomical. We could not afford it. So you took Harper's share, Marlene said. You forged her signature on the release form. I have a copy right here. And you liquidated her trust to pay for Derek's fraternity dues and his study abroad trip to Italy. My mother cried out. We did it for the family. Derek had potential. He was going to be a leader. Harper was just going to be a worker. We invested in the child who could give us the best return. It was a business decision. The room went dead silent. A business decision. They had looked at their 2 children and decided one was a stock worth buying and the other was an asset to be liquidated. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but it wasn't a new pain. It was just the old ache, finally given a name. So I paid for my own college, I said softly. And I paid for Derek's college. And I paid for Marlene's cancer. And I paid for Caleb's trucks. And you paid for this house, Marlene added. She dropped the final piece of paper onto the pile. 6 years ago, Stewart, you made a bad gamble on that real estate development in Florida. You lost everything. The bank sent a foreclosure notice for this house. You were 2 weeks away from being on the street. My father looked down at his hands. Who do you think paid the arrows? Marlene asked, who do you think wired $55,000 to the bank to stop the sheriff from putting a lock on your door? My mother looked at Derek. You said you fixed it. You said you got a bonus. Derek looked away. I didn't have the money. Then I asked Harper. The truth hung in the air, ugly and naked. Derek had taken the credit again. I had saved them from homelessness, and they had thanked him, and he had let them. And you still treat her like garbage, Marlene said, her voice trembling with fury. You sit here in the house. She saved eating food she could buy and sell 10 times over. And you call her a traitor because she finally stopped you from stealing from her. Derek slammed his fist on the table. She is fine. Look at her. She is successful. She didn't need that money. I needed it. I needed the start. Why is she so greedy? She has everything, and she still wants to count every penny from 20 years ago. He looked at me with pure hatred. You could have just signed the warehouse over. Harper, you could have just let me have this one thing. But no, you had to be right. You had to win. I stood up. The chair legs scraped against the hardwood floor. I looked at my father, who wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at my mother, who was still crying. But now I saw the tears for what they were: manipulation. I do not want your money, I said. I do not want an apology. I do not even want you to like me. I placed my hands on the table. I just want you to stop using my name as your wallet. I want you to stop pretending that my sacrifice is your success. I looked at Derek, and for the record, Derek, I did not survive because of your potential. I survived in spite of it. I turned to leave. Wait, Marlene said. She reached into the box one last time. She pulled out a fresh legal document. It was thick and bound in a blue cover. I am the executive of your grandfather's estate, Marlene said. I technically still have power over the distribution errors if fraud can be proven. She looked at my father. Stewart, what you did was criminal fraud. You stole from a minor. I could go to the police. My father went pale. Marlene, you wouldn't. We are family. Exactly, Marlene said, which is why I am giving you a choice. You can be prosecuted, or you can agree to the terms of this restitution. She slid the document toward me. I am petitioning to restore Harper's trust fund adjusted for 20 years of interest and inflation. The money will come out of the remaining assets in the family estate, specifically the lien on this house and the remainder of Derek's severance if he gets any. She held out a pen to me. I am fixing the books. Harper, I am balancing the ledger, but to do it, I need the beneficiary to initiate the claim. She looked me in the eye. I need your signature. The room held its breath. My parents looked terrified. Derek looked defeated. I looked at the pen. It was a simple ballpoint pen, but it felt heavy. This wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming the history they had stolen from me. I took the pen. I did not look at my parents. I did not look at my brother. I looked at the line where my name belonged. For the first time in my life, signing my name didn't feel like paperwork. It felt like justice. Even after being escorted out of the building by security, Derek did not stop fighting. He just changed his weapon from charm to mud. On Thursday morning, a formal complaint landed in the inbox of the Greystone Board of Directors. It was flagged as a whistleblower report. In it, Derek alleged that I, Harper Rodriguez, had abused my privileges as an external auditor to conduct corporate espionage. He claimed I had downloaded proprietary data unrelated to the compliance scope to leverage a personal vendetta against him. He argued that the evidence against him was fruit of the poisonous tree, obtained illegally, and therefore should be inadmissible in the internal review. It was a desperate, flailing attempt to drag me down into the swamp with him. I sat in Marcus Thorne's office as he read the complaint aloud. The general counsel looked bored. He claims you access the marketing drive without authorization, Marcus said, flipping a page. He also claims you use the server logs to stalk his personal location. I took a sip of my coffee. It was black and bitter. My contract, which you drafted, Marcus, grants me unencumbered access to all data streams related to the Mid-Atlantic Division, I said calmly. That includes marketing, payroll, and building security logs. I did not break a single protocol. Every file I opened is stamped with my digital ID. I hid nothing because I had nothing to hide. Marcus nodded. He dropped the complaint into the shredder. The machine word eating Derek's last defense in 3 seconds. The irony, Marcus said, watching the paper disappear, is that by listing the specific files he's angry about you seeing, he is confirming that those files contain incriminating material. He just confessed to the crime in his attempt to suppress the evidence. Wesley Carradine sat in the corner chair, looking out the window at the skyline of Briar Haven. He turned to me. We are denying his complaint, obviously, but this creates a timeline issue. We need to close the acquisition of the Marlow Bay warehouse before Derek files a wrongful termination suit. If he sues, the assets get frozen in litigation. We need the deed signed, sealed, and recorded by the end of the week. I looked at Wesley. I am ready to sign, I said, but the price has gone up. Wesley raised an eyebrow. I thought we agreed on fair market value. We did. I said the financial price remains $8 million, but the operational price has changed. I pulled a document from my bag. I want a clause inserted into the purchase agreement. Greystone must implement a transparent vendor vetting process for the Savannah hub. Every contractor must be audited quarterly, and I want the right to name the new compliance officer for that division. Wesley smiled. You want to make sure no one pulls a Derek again. I want to make sure my property is not used to launder money. I corrected. Done. Wesley said as I left the legal office. My phone buzzed. It was a number I did not recognize. Meet me at the Starbucks on 3rd. Alone. It is about Derek. I hesitated. I thought about ignoring it. But curiosity is a powerful force. I walked to the coffee shop, sitting at a back table, wearing dark sunglasses and a trench coat like she was in a spy movie, was Kelsey, Derek's fiancée. She looked tired. Her usually perfect makeup was smudged, and she was gripping a latte cup with both hands, as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the earth. I sat down. Hello, Kelsey. She did not say hello. She slid a thumb drive across the table. He asked me to lie, she said, her voice shaking. Last night, he came home and told me that if anyone asks, the Aspen trip was a business meeting and I was just there as his assistant. He told me to delete the photos from Instagram. I looked at the thumb drive. What is this? Kelsey took a deep breath. 6 months ago, Derek brought home a stack of papers. He said he needed to practice his signature for a special project. He asked me to help. He made it a game. He showed me a signature on an old birthday card, your signature, and asked if I could trace it. My blood ran cold. He told me it was a prank, Kelsey whispered. He said you guys played jokes on each other all the time. I traced it on a few blank pages. I didn't know what he was going to use them for until I heard him screaming on the phone with his lawyer this morning about a forged deed. She looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. I am not going to jail for him. Harper, I like the trips. I like the gifts. I didn't ask where the money came from, and that makes me stupid. I know, but I am not a criminal. She pushed the drive closer. There are emails on there. Him sending me the scan of your signature, him asking me to make it look authentic. It proves he premeditated the forgery. I took the drive. It was the final nail. With this, Derek wasn't just facing civil liability. He was facing prison time. Thank you, Kelsey, I said. She stood up, pulling her coat tight. He told me I was the love of his life, she said bitterly. But when the ship started sinking, he tried to use me as a life raft. You are lucky, Harper. You got away from him a long time ago. I watched her leave. I did not feel lucky. I felt tired. I went back to the office and found Ethan Cole waiting by the elevator. He looked different. He was standing taller. His tie was straight, and he was holding a box of personal items. Moving out? I asked. Moving up. He grinned. Wesley just offered me the senior analyst role. They are putting my name back on the Savannah project, and they are giving me the back pay for the bonus Derek stole. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt in days. You earned it, Ethan. Just remember how this feels. Don't become him. I won't, he said seriously. Thanks to you, I know the difference between a boss and a leader. I walked into my temporary office and closed the door. I had 2 stacks of paperwork on my desk. Stack A was the sale of Marlowe Bay Holdings to Greystone Freight Solutions. It was thick, heavy, and worth $8 million. It represented my competence, my foresight, and my victory. Stack B was thinner, but far heavier. It was an affidavit I had prepared with Aunt Marlene's lawyer. It was a petition to the probate court to reopen my grandfather's estate based on new evidence of fraud. It demanded full restitution of my trust fund from the assets of Stuart and Linda Marlowe. I picked up my pen. The door opened without a knock. My parents walked in. They looked aged. My father's shoulders were slumped. My mother's face was puffy and red. They did not look like the arrogant monarchs of the Christmas dinner. They looked like frightened children who had broken a vase and were waiting to see if they would be punished. "Harper," my mother started, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." I did not stand up. I stayed seated behind my desk, the barrier between us clear and solid. "I am working." I said, "Please." My father said. His voice was raspy. Derek is in a bad place. He says you are going to press charges. He says you are going to take the house." I looked at them. "I am not taking the house. Aunt Marlene is. She is the executive. She is following the law. You can stop her." My mother pleaded. "She listens to you. If you just drop this restitution thing, we can figure something out. We can pay you back slowly. But if you take the house, where will we go? We are too old to start over. You should have thought about that 20 years ago." I said, "When you forged my signature and stole my future to pay for Derek's fraternity parties, it was for the family." My mother cried out, the old refrain echoing off the walls. "We thought Derek would make it big and take care of all of us. We were betting on the winner, and that is the problem, isn't it?" I said, my voice quiet but cutting. "You didn't just bet on him. You sacrificed me to do it. You cannibalized one child to feed the other. And now that he has failed, you want the meal to apologize for being eaten." My father stepped forward, his face hardening. "You are heartless," he spat. "You have millions coming from this warehouse deal. You don't need the trust fund money. You are doing this out of spite. You want to see us suffer." I opened the folder on my desk. Stack B. I pulled out a copy of the withdrawal slip from 20 years ago. It showed my name signed in my father's handwriting. "I am not doing this for the money," I said. "I am doing this for the 18-year-old girl who had to scrub toilets in the dorms because her father told her there was nothing left. I am doing this because you need to learn that you cannot steal people's lives and call it parenting." I held up the paper. "This is your signature. Dad, you committed a crime. I am simply correcting the ledger." My mother sobbed. "We will lose everything. You have each other." I said coldly. "And you have Derek. Isn't he the future of the family? Go ask him for help." They stared at me. They realized finally that the emotional currency they had used to control me for decades, guilt, obligation, shame, was worthless here. I had devalued their currency to zero. "Get out of my office," I said. They left. They walked out slowly, dragging their feet, looking small and defeated. I did not feel guilty. I felt light. I worked until 8:00 in the evening. The office emptied out. The cleaning crew came and went. I packed up my bag. I had the signed documents in my briefcase. The deal was ready to close. I walked out to the parking garage. It was raining again, a cold, sleeping rain that stung the skin. The concrete structure was dim and echoing. My footsteps sounded loud in the emptiness. I reached my car and unlocked the door. "Harper." The voice came from the shadows between a concrete pillar and a parked SUV. Derek stepped out. He looked like a ghost. His eyes were wild, rimmed with dark circles. He was wearing the same clothes from the day before, now wrinkled and damp. He looked nothing like the executive who had held court at the Silver Peak Lodge. I gripped my keys, the metal biting into my palm. "Go home, Derek." "I don't have a home." He laughed, a jagged sound. "Kelsey kicked me out. She gave the ring back. She told me she talked to you." He took a step toward me. "You took everything. Harper, you took my job. You took my girl. You took my money. You took my parents' house. Are you happy?" Is this what you wanted to be the winner? I did not back away. I stood my ground. I didn't take anything. Derek, you lost it. You gambled it. You stole it. I just stopped letting you win with my chips. He lunged forward, slamming his hand against the window of my car. If you sign those papers, he hissed, his face inches from mine, you are done. You are not a Marlowe anymore. You are an orphan. If you sign that restitution order, you have no family, no father, no mother, no brother. You will be alone with your money. I looked him in the eye. I saw the fear behind the rage. I saw the little boy who had been told he was a king so many times he believed the world owed him a throne. I unlocked my car door and opened it. I looked back at him one last time. Derek, I said, my voice steady and final, I haven't had a family for a long time. I just had a group of people who billed me for their existence. I got in the car. I slammed the door. I locked it. He stood there in the rain watching me. He didn't bang on the glass again. He just watched as I started the engine and drove away, leaving him standing in the exhaust fumes of the life he had set on fire. Halfway home, my phone rang. It was Wesley. Harper, he said, we are ready to execute the file signatures. The lawyers have cleared the paperwork. Good. I said, where do you want to meet the office? Nobo. Wesley said, I think we need to do this properly. I want to close the loop. He paused. I have reserved the private dining room at the Silver Peak Lodge for tomorrow night. I felt a chill run down my spine. The same room, I asked. The same table. Wesley confirmed. Bring the papers. Bring your pen. It ends where it began. I hung up. I looked at the road ahead. The rain was clearing and the moon was breaking through the clouds. I was going back to the mountain, back to the table where they had called me a failure. But this time I wasn't going to be sitting at the end near the service entrance. This time I was the one setting the table. Returning to the Silver Peak Lodge felt like walking onto a film set after the crew had struck the lights and left only the props. The room was exactly as it had been on Christmas night. The faux rustic beams were still polished. The fireplace still crackled with an orchestrated warmth. Even the smell was the same, pine needles and expensive meat. But the cast had changed, and the genre of the play had shifted from a family drama to a legal procedural. I arrived 10 minutes early. This time, I did not sit at the end of the table near the service entrance. I sat at the center, flanked by Marcus Thorne, the general counsel, and a court-appointed notary public whose stamp sat on the linen tablecloth like a gavel waiting to fall. Wesley Carradine sat opposite me. Between us lay two thick stacks of documents. When the doors opened, my family entered. They looked like ghosts of the people they had been a week ago. Derek walked in first, but the strut was gone. His shoulders were hunched and his eyes darted around the room, assessing the threat level. He saw the lawyers. He saw the notary. He saw me. For a fleeting second, a look of relief washed over his face. He thought this was a rescue mission. He thought the presence of the lawyers meant we were hammering out a non-disclosure agreement to hush everything up. My parents, Stuart and Linder, followed him. They were dressed in their Sunday best, clinging to the illusion of respectability. My mother was holding a handkerchief. My father was holding a thin folder of his own. They looked at me not with anger, but with a desperate, cloying hope. To them, my presence meant money, and money meant salvation. Please sit down, Wesley said. His voice was not welcoming. It was the voice of a man rating a menu he had already memorized. They took their seats. Derek sat where he had sat on Christmas, but the head of the table now felt like the dock of a court. I am glad we could all meet, Derek began, his voice tremulous. I think things got a little heated last week. We are all family here. I am sure we can find a middle ground that protects the company and preserves relationships. He looked at me, forcing a smile that looked painful. Right, Harper? I did not smile back. I did not blink. I simply rested my hands on the table right next to the documents. This is not a negotiation, Derek. Wesley cut in. This is a closing. Wesley opened the first letter binder. We are here to execute two transactions, Wesley explained. The first is the acquisition of the Marlowe Bay property. The deadline for the merger is tomorrow. We need the deed. Derek let out a breath, his entire body sagging with relief. Okay, good. See, I told you she would come around. She knows how important this is. He looked at my father. Once she signs that, the deal goes through. I can claim the commission. We can fix the restitution issue with the bonus. It is all going to work out." Wesley ignored him. He turned to the second binder, the second transaction. Wesley continued, "Is the execution of the civil recovery order regarding the misappropriated funds from the Greystone accounts." My father stiffened. "Civil recovery? We thought if Harper signed the deed, the company would drop the investigation." Wesley looked at my father with genuine confusion. "Why would we do that? You stole $48,000 from us." "But it is in the family." My mother cried out. "Harper is the owner. If she signs the deal, she is technically the partner. She can waive the debt. She can tell you to let it go." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Harper, tell him. Tell him it is water under the bridge. You are going to be rich after this signature. You do not need to count pennies." I looked at the woman who had birthed me. Even now, facing legal ruin, her only strategy was to volunteer my resources to cover her mistakes. "I am not the partner yet," I said, my voice calm and low. "And even if I were, I do not subsidize theft." Wesley leaned forward. He placed a single sheet of paper in the center of the table. It was a flowchart. It showed the wire transfers from Apex Logistics, the shell company Derek created, going into the Stewart and Linder Marlowe Joint Trust. But then it showed something else. It showed transfers leaving that trust and going to a luxury car dealership, a travel agency, and a high-end contractor who had renovated their kitchen. "We finished the forensic audit this morning," Wesley said. "We found the vendor connection. You did not just receive the money, you spent it. You knew exactly where it was coming from because the memo lines on the transfers were labeled consulting fee." Derek, my father, went pale. He told us it was a bonus. He stammered. He said he structured it that way for tax purposes. "Ignorance is not a defense when you are laundering money." Marcus Thorne said from beside me, "The circle is closed. We have the chain of custody." Derek slammed his hand on the table. "You cannot do this." He shouted at Wesley. "You are only doing this because of her. You are destroying my life just to impress my sister. What did she tell you? Did she tell you I bullied her? Is that it? You are being the white knight for the poor. Sad girl." Wesley looked at Derek with cold, pitying eyes. "No, Derek, I'm not doing this for her. I am doing this for the shareholders." He pointed a finger at me. "I am doing this because she is the only person at this table who understands that a signature actually means something. She is the only one I trust to hold the pen." My mother reached into her purse. She pulled out the document my father had been holding. She slid it across the table toward me. It skidded on the linen and stopped near my hand. "Harper, look," she said, her voice shaking. "We prepared this. It is a family agreement. If you sign this, it says that we forgive you for the stress you caused. It says we acknowledge you helped us, and in exchange you agreed to cover the restitution to the company out of your sale proceeds." I looked down at the paper, Family Settlement and Mutual Forgiveness Agreement. They wanted me to pay back the money they stole, and in return they would forgive me for catching them. The audacity was so pure, it was almost beautiful. I picked up the paper. I looked at it for exactly 1 second. Then I slid it back. "I do not need your forgiveness," I said, "and I do not sign papers that cover up crimes." Derek looked at the rejected paper, then at me. "You are going to let them take the house," he hissed. "You are going to let them sue Mom and Dad." "I am not letting them do anything." I said, "You did this. You spent the money. You signed the fake invoices." I turned to Wesley. "I am ready to sign the first packet." Wesley slid the heavy document toward me. "Asset Purchase Agreement, Marlowe Bay Holdings." I flipped to the back page. I picked up the heavy fountain pen. It felt cool and solid in my hand. "Wait," Derek yelled. He stood up, reaching for the document. The security guard in the corner took a step forward. Derek froze. "If you sign that," Derek said, his voice cracking, "you are helping the company that fired me. You are siding with the enemy." I looked up at him. "I am not siding with anyone. Derek, I am closing a business deal." I looked at the terms, $8 million. But more importantly, the clause I had inserted, Independent Oversight Authority. I signed my name, Harper Rodriguez. The ink was dark and permanent. With that signature, I was no longer the failure. I was the strategic partner. I was the one who had saved the merger. I was the one who controlled the road they needed to drive on. I handed the document to the notary. He stamped it. Clack, clack. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Now the second packet," Wesley said. He slid the other stack toward me. This one was bound in blue legal covers. "Affidavit of restitution and estate recovery." My parents gasped. "That is the trust fund paperwork," my father whispered. "Marlene said, she said you wouldn't sign it. She said you wouldn't do that to us." Marlene was standing by the door. I hadn't looked at her until now. She nodded at me. I flipped the document open. It detailed the amount my parents had stolen from my education fund 20 years ago. It calculated the interest. It listed the assets to be seized to repay the lien on their house, their retirement accounts, and any liquid cash remaining in the trust. "Harper, please." My mother sobbed. "We will be destitute. We are your parents. You should have thought about that when you robbed an 18-year-old girl to pay for a fraternity party." I said. I looked at the signature line. This wasn't just about the money. This was about the truth. For 20 years, they had told me I was worth less. They had told me I deserved less. They had monetized my inferiority to subsidize Derek's superiority. Signing this paper was not an act of revenge. It was an act of correction. It was balancing the books. Derek leaned over the table. "If you sign that, Harper, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? You have no family. You walk out that door and you're alone." I looked at him. I looked at the parents who were weeping not for me but for their bank accounts. "I have been alone in this room for 30 years. Derek," I said. I lowered the pen. I signed. "Harper Rodriguez." The notary stamped it. Clack, clack. It was done. My father put his head on the table. My mother wailed. A sound of pure selfish despair. Derek stared at the paper as if it were a bomb that had just detonated. Wesley closed the binders. He handed them to Marcus. "The transfer is complete." Wesley said, "The legal proceedings regarding the restitution will begin on Monday. You have 30 days to vacate the property." He stood up. "I suggest you use that time to pack." Derek looked at me. His eyes were red, filled with a hate so deep it looked like love turned inside out. "I hope it was worth it." He spat. "I hope the money keeps you warm." I stood up. I buttoned my coat. The wool felt like armor. "It is not about the money, Derek." I said it never was. I looked at the table one last time. The crystal glasses, the white roses, the scene of so many humiliations. "It is about the fact that I finally learned how to use a pen." I turned my back on them. I did not look at my parents. I did not look at my brother. I walked toward the heavy oak doors. Marlene opened the door for me. As I passed her, she squeezed my arm. A silent thank you. I stepped out into the night. The air was biting cold, sharp and clean in my lungs. The snow was falling again, covering the world in a blanket of white, erasing the footprints of everything that had come before. I walked to my car. I did not look back at the lodge. I did not look back at the window where I knew they were still sitting, trapped in the wreckage of their own making. I got in, turned the key, and drove away. The road ahead was dark, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I owned the road. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe winding down at home? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, please subscribe to Azad Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who need a reminder that sometimes the quiet ones are the ones you should be most afraid of. See you in the next story. Thanks for watching.